Change is around us every day. So, how do you manage the changes that happen in mining year round? Welcome to another episode of Change Itself, hosted by Gus Miner and Eric Demers. The show is brought to you by Sophie and Technica Mining and produced by Crownsman Partners. Now, here are your hosts, Gus and Eric.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in again with Change Itself. We got an exciting episode today, episode 12, already into episode 12. And don't forget, if you want to keep getting notifications and learning more about what's going on with our episodes, go ahead and subscribe to our page on LinkedIn with Change Itself, or on YouTube. If you look up Change Itself and then like the page or ring the bell or subscribe. You can also go to changeitself.com and have access to our content. And we're always, looking forward to more feedback and learning more from more entertaining guests and just, sharing a conversation on change management. Eric, here we go for episode 12.
Episode 12. So that means we've been doing this. We've done this. We're going on our 12th time. It's been a year. It's kind of our anniversary.
It's our anniversary. That's for sure.
We got here, so it's awesome.
Yeah, and based on that, today's episode, we're going to be talking very deeply with Ken Schroeder from Epiroc about change management and change management timelines, because we know that's sometimes an elusive concept or an elusive schedule when we start wanting to implement significant change. So welcome aboard, Ken. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here, guys. Just to give you a bit of a heads up, I am sitting in a conference room here at our office in Cadillac in Quebec. So I have a few people going in and out, but I think it's going to be pretty quiet for the most part.
That was very good. Thanks for the heads up. So maybe Ken, I know we've had conversations in the past, and you've been at the helm of many different projects throughout your career. With implementing either new systems, new procedures, new technology. So when it comes to implementing new things in an organization, and we know that it's different from a project or from an actual operation that's already on the go.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you in the past? In your experience so far, as far as implementing change, and how long it normally takes with an organization?
So good question, Gus. And, when I think about it, I've been, in the field of operational excellence, which is essentially, change management. If you think of things like lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, that people I know have heard out there. I've been in this field now since my end of my time in chemicals in 2001. And I've worked in a number of industries. I had the very end of chemicals when I was doing it. Spent a very small time in automotive, foods, pipe coating, and then mining really since 2008. So, and then on my own business too. So I've really kind of seen it, for the last 20 years and what it's about. And for me, the biggest thing has a bit about it. It's that it's a continuous process, and if you're looking at, change and trying to drive new things, I liken it to a lot of conversations I have with people, in terms of a workout program or exercise, right? It's, if you want to see the benefits at it, you got to keep at it. It's not something that is, defined in terms of there's a start and there's an end. There's certainly phases to it, I would say, in like an initial phase and, kind of when you're getting through it. But it's something that you need to be able to commit to day in and day out, and change how you do things continuously or on some sort of, plan as far as that goes, because it's constantly evolving. Just like the way it is for me when I have to go work out, a lot of days I don't want to, but I do it anyway, because I know it's the right thing and it's the way of being able to keep forward. So if there was one thing that I sit here and I think about, whether it's bringing in a new way of doing things, technology, you name it, it is something that needs to be continuously reinforced, continuously adjusted in order to be able to keep moving forward. It is not a defined, start and end from that particular point of view. And especially when we look at things like technology and mining now, and actually I'm giving a presentation on this specific topic at CIM next week about, around new behaviors and the way of being able to think about things, because as we bring in technology, how people do their jobs day in and day out is going to change, and it's significant from that particular point of view. If I look at a typical underground operation, open pit operation, right from the mine manager, right down to the guys on the shop floor. I think if there's anything I want to be able to, leave on that, is that this process is continuous from that perspective.
Do you have any like tools or strategies or tactics that you use to, stay on top of it and not let it wane? Like you talked about going to gym, that's a personal commitment you make. Do you like,
Yes.
you use your dashboards? Like what are types of things that you're using to like stay on track and keep it going, even when it might be difficult?
So, I mean, if I was to look at, what we've done at, Hud Bay, for example, and I think Layler Mine, and, we implemented, when we brought in Mobile Airs there, we implemented short interval control. And what we basically did for a pretty simple, a simple thing was we built a pretty simple Excel sheet, to be able to record the amount of buckets that an operator would call in, say at 10 hours, 12 hours, or say 10 o'clock in the morning, say noon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, etc. And, you were looking at something simple as, if your target for the day was 100 buckets, by 10 in the morning, you should be X amount of buckets. By noon, you should be X amount of buckets. The whole idea around that change management piece in there, it was just a simple tool to be able to record where you're at with regards to target. And it sets the expectation amongst the guys that, I have a target every day now for shift, right? That I'm expected, to get whatever my target is for buckets, as opposed to, so that's a change, right? As opposed to, I go down and muck and I get what I get at the end of the day. So that's a change, right? And then just a real simple tool like that to reinforce that change, that there's an expectation upon the operator supervisor that I call in on a regular basis. And if I'm not on target, what are the things that has delayed me to being on target? That's a real simple type of example, but it's very effective. And all that came out of was basically an Excel sheet and the ability to record where you're at and then log issues around why you didn't make target. That's a completely different mindset, compared to the traditional way of mining around things. When we talk about, setting target for people, holding to account for expectations on performance, it's much different. It may be something that, in traditional manufacturing has been around for quite a little while, but it's different now, as opposed to a target of, 2,000 tons a shift or 2,000 tons for the day, let's say, now I'm breaking it down to specific goals per operator, right? Big change. And you want to be able to track progress. So something very as simple as an Excel sheet is a great tool for being able to do that.
What's is
Yep.
the employee or
Tools that I
operator
have.
feedback?
What's that? Sorry, Eric?
Does the operator or that employee, are they getting direct feedback on their number of buckets, or how's that influence it? It's interesting because we use targets slightly
Yeah.
different in the like realm of health and safety, where we're setting targets on certain prevention activities, whether it's workplace inspections or job observations. One thing
Yeah.
we haven't done is provided or asked people to check in through the month and give us an update on where they're at, and how things are going, and if there's anything getting in the way from them meeting their targets. So I found that to be really interesting, and I'm wondering, is there like some feedback to the operator?
Basically, I think all that happens, Eric, from that particular point of view. And again, you're right. It's something that is just evolving. To be able to speak specifically back to the operator, I would certainly imagine that by the end of the shift, they'll know if they're on target or not. Now, to be able to say exactly, if there's a feedback coming from the supervisor in that case, let's say to that operator, I cannot comment to that specifically. But, when you think about change management and giving feedback to people as a way of motivation, that is certainly an excellent way of being able to do that, right? Did I hit my target or not? And I could certainly take off on this subject if you're interested in the way I look at it from that particular point of view. But I can't say for sure that is done yet or not. But certainly, they know what their expectation is through the shift as far as that goes. So it helps the guys stay motivated and focused from that point of view. I think it's very beneficial.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that was really, really interesting, and we've been talking about it for the past few minutes. Is normally when we want to introduce something, we see the finish line. We know what the finish line, what we want it to look like, right? So we say, okay, we're now going to be introducing this system, this process, or to your example, short level controls. So starting now, we're doing this, right? And what was really interesting what you said there was that you actually split up quite a bit what that starting now looks like, and I guess what you're getting at is the first thing on your agenda is to tackle the behavior part and not focus so much on the output, don't focus so much on what the end goal is on the change. It's okay. First, we just got to get people in the groove of just telling us what's going on.
Exactly.
And then once we know what's going on and we have that, we can depend on that. Okay, now we've got recordable measurements. And then once you got recordable measurements, then you can start, getting that data to work towards that change, which was really interesting to break it down from a habit forming perspective, right? So, no different than going to the gym. It'll take you about 28 days before you can call it a habit, and that it's now part of your routine. And then once you have that routine set, then you can start depending on the fact that you're going to go down or up 1 pound a week, or down or up on calories, or you can start changing the variables around it to get to the end goal. But you have to set that habit first, which was something really interesting that I picked up from that conversation. I don't know if you want to dive into that a little bit more.
So one of the things I learned back in my days of Valley, I worked with this one consultant company that helped us on some continuous improvement stuff, and damned if I can remember their name now, but they were a behavior-based type of consultant. And the one thing I learned from them, so this goes back, I think, Gus, to like 2010. One of the things I learned from them, and one of the tools that I use is what they call a decom model. And it means if you want somebody to engage in a behavior, there's 4 things you need to be able to provide. It's the acronym is decom. I'll be darned if I can remember who the name of the company is now. So the decom model is direction, competence, opportunity, and motivation. And direction is about, like what we talked about. Direction is giving people a task or a goal that is well defined. So as opposed to muck your stope, on stope 30 on level 910, muck 32 on 910, and the expectation is so many tons. That's giving a direction, a goal, and you'll use this equipment and things like that. Competence is about, so direction is something management can provide. Competence is about, training the guys. Can they run that scoop competently? We spend a lot of effort on training people from that point of view. Third piece is what we call opportunity. And, does he have the ability to complete that goal? Is the scoop available? Can he get to the draw point, et cetera? Does he have time in his day to be able to do it? And those first 3 things, when we think about it, is, and you guys have probably heard it, is what we call antecedents, things to prompt behavior, right? The last one is M, and that's motivation. And it's either do or do not, maybe not in strict terms, but that's basically what it's saying. The first three pieces is what management focuses on the vast majority of their efforts, the D, C, and O, right? But they only account for maybe 20% of the desired behavior of what you want to see. So if we see things like when we put procedures in the workplace, we put signage in the workplace, we train people and expect people that are going to change and, do the new behavior of what we want. But where we don't spend a whole lot of effort, which is 80% of the battle, is in the motivation piece. And that is the place where Eric talked about providing feedback. And what you're wanting to try to be able to do is catch people in the act of doing it right. So, a guy's mucking a stove, you want to catch them in the opportunity of doing the behavior you want, your desired behavior, and catch them in the act of doing it right and have a conversation with them about it, a meaningful fact-based conversation of him doing it right. Hence that's kind of the role of the supervisor. The biggest role of the supervisor out there is to provide consequences for his operator. And I mean positive consequences. It's kind of, you want to catch him 4 or 5 times doing things right, as opposed to the one time you catch them doing it wrong. And as you reinforce those behaviors, it becomes an expectation now from the operator that he can trust that, that somebody cares about the work I'm doing. Somebody cares about the quality of work I'm doing. Somebody cares enough to be able to talk to me about those things, right? And it's a conversation. It's, Eric, what you said, feedback on how they performed at the end of the day. And to me, that is one of the biggest things when we talk about change management, digitalization in mining, that how people do their jobs is going to have to really change around things like this, right? So it's that direction, competence, opportunity, which we're very good at, but the biggest change for people now, and this is kind of where that exercise program thing is that I think about, is those conversations that happen, right? And you can measure those conversations. How many did you have? What did you talk about? And that's kind of the responsibility now of the general foreman, sitting above who the supervisor reports to, right? And he talks to the supervisor about what kind of conversations did you have, how many, what's your what did you talk about, right? And that's kind of starts to drive that cascade of behaviors. It's more complex than this, but that's the way of being tried to be able to lay it out. So when you think about, change management and does it ever end? Well, no, it doesn't ever end, because that's what you're trying to be able to get to from that perspective.
Every worker deserves to go home safely at the end of the day. Book a demo with Sophie to discover how their groundbreaking EHS management software empowers workers to proactively avoid hazards and how organizations like yours can cultivate a stronger work culture. Visit them at sophie.com. Technica Mining is a premier underground mining and construction contractor. They stand for delivering quality project work on time and on budget through innovative thinking. Their excellent safety record, experienced workforce, and large equipment fleet will guarantee the timely completion of all your project needs. Trusted by the world's leading mining companies, Technica Mining has over 20 years of experience in mine construction, development, and production. Contact Technica Mining to take your next mining project to the next level. Visit them at technicamining.com. Change Itself is produced by Crownsman, the voice of industry. Check out more, including The Crownsman Show, Mining Now, Crownsman Energy, and Crownsman Egg at crownsman.com.
I really like that model. It's got the hamsters turning now, and I'm seeing opportunities of things I haven't quite done well and what I can take forward. And even as an organization, on some of the change initiatives and things we're doing and how we've designed them, and the intent is to do exactly what you're talking about, the positive reinforcement. And we kind of maybe forget that intent, or we're not using it in that way. So one of the things is we do layered, visible felt leadership, layered audits. And if as we're doing those things, we're catching, to borrow your phrase, is catching people doing something well and reinforcing it and talking about it. And we see a correlation when we're doing these activities, our performance is better, right? And when we drop off, we see that our performance starts to decline. So it's, as you're saying it, it's like totally explaining what I've been seeing. So it's like, okay, now how do I go apply this and do more of that? Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
And no problem, Eric. When, I mean, we have a great roadmap to me in safety when it comes to mining, right?
Yeah.
Look how that has progressed over the years, with SAFE, the acronym from Valley, and what you said, visible felt leadership, right? We have an excellent model in safety. All the training we put into it, all the procedures we put into it, everybody's talking about it. We have safety days, we have toolbox talks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no reason, when you think about change management in digital or whatever you're trying to do, it's the same thing. We can talk about, the work that you're doing and safety at the same time within that same framework.
Yeah. And I like your part on the 20% of our time is spent on that, like DCOM, because
Yeah.
right away, as you're talking about it, I'm seeing the things I could do different in there. And as you talked about, 80% is in the motivation side of things. And I'm like, man, maybe we're doing too much and trying to tweak too much and trying to get that DCO part so right and so dialed, because we feel like that's all we can control, that we're taking away that opportunity to improve the motivation part.
Right. I mean, the motivation part, and I think we can all understand this, right? Giving feedback is not an easy thing. You got to be able to take time for it. You got to be, in a good frame of mind to be able to do it. You got to kind of gear yourself up sometimes to do it. You got to take, what you really have to do is have to want to take interest in talking to somebody about things.
And receiving it.
And receiving it.
And receiving it, right? So like, that's what I'm getting from this conversation right now too, is that the M has the biggest, well, seemingly the biggest impact in your change management journey. However,
Correct.
the first change management you have to do is creating the habits for the M.
Correct. Correct.
And once you create those habits of like give and receive, the conversation, the exchange of positive feedback, then you can actually go back to it's almost like the M should be before the DCO.
I get what you mean. Yes, you're right.
It almost sounds this way, right? Because it is counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive because we are raised right from an early age, right? You can get 9 out of 10 out of a test or an exam or a school project, wherever. And the first thing you do is start talking about the one that you got wrong so that you can capitalize on the opportunity for the last 10%. Meanwhile, in reality, if you really celebrated the 9 out of 10, the likelihood of getting a 9.5 out of 10 next is much more achievable than trying to beat up on the one you got wrong. So it is counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive. But that's something that I'm taking away immediately, is that, the very first step in your initiative would be to create the habits that's going to reinforce the habits you're chasing. Right?
Correct. If I think about a tool, specifically to that decom model, there are, I have a tool like a behavior change sheet, where you can document the behavior that you want, antecedents, the DCO piece, and then determine what is motivating factors, and at least if you're able to document it from that point of view, you have a bit of a game plan on what you're trying to be able to do from that perspective. So that's another tool that kind of comes in with that, in addition to something simple like, Eric, that Excel sheet where we record, quantitative information. So yeah, it's pretty interesting when it comes to these things, and having conversations with people. You got to want to be able to do it. You need the opportunity to be able to do it. And, it's changing your frame of mind around things. And when I look at the evolution of technology now in in underground mining, the more you move to automated processes, let's say automated drilling, automated mucking, things like that, how operators do their jobs and interact with technology, that DCOM model, the decom model becomes very important. How supervisors interact with that operator on technology now, again, because their job can now more change to, coaching in the workplace as opposed to, running around getting supplies for guys or firefighting, right? And people are from the point of view of a supervisor. If you take away my firefighting, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So many,
Seen that
there's
one.
so many different things. Oh yeah. Because that's what they, a lot of guys, they're built on firefighting.
They're good at it.
They're darn good at it. Yeah.
It feels good. It's like it keeps it's one of these things that keeps reinforcing itself.
It certainly does.
More fires are to fight.
Well,
It
even from an operator's perspective, right? There's a lot of pride that goes into being able to make those judgment calls and perform well because you've made those decisions. And now you're saying, I want you to line up the piece of equipment and let the automation do its piece and just supervise, right?
Correct.
And then they're saying, well, my success that I've known forever has been to be able to make those dynamic decisions and to do a good job. So now you're saying to just not do that. What do I do with my day? Right. So
Correct.
it is a huge change. In reality, is they're actually, with their feedback, they're actually helping to mentor and coach the automation, because if it does get it slightly wrong, they can offer that feedback instead of like the knee-jerk reactions to just take over the controls and fix it. But then you never really know if the automation is going to work or not because you're just taking over control. So you're probably seeing a lot of that when you're transitioning operators from, manual to semi-autonomous to autonomous.
Yeah.
You're probably seeing a lot of that. We're like, I know better than the grid. I know better than the automation. I'm just going to interject and we'll make sure we're successful. In the meantime, you're taking 3 steps back, right? You're probably seeing a lot of that.
Correct. I think, yesterday I was with a customer here in Quebec or in the Val d'Or region, and they are a contractor miner. And I was shocked from the point of view when I was talking with them about that the way, they have, so for example, on their jumbo drills, they're a development contractor, but they do other things. They run their development drills in auto. So a drill plan is downloaded electronically, loaded onto the jumbo. The jumbo does its work. Because I asked him, do you have a problem with overbrake or underbrake? And he goes, no. And I was like, okay. He says, we run our drills in auto. And I nearly fell off my chair because that's so unusual, because companies, what I've seen so far is, and I know things are changing, right? But mining companies would buy a lot of technology to go with it. And their biggest struggle by far is getting operators to use that technology. They won't, So if you think about, what this company has done and, compared to the vast majority of people that buy technology, they have implemented in that work structure that when you get hired on or, as part of, we talk about a motivating factor, right? As part of your bonus will depend upon whether you run an automation or not.
Wow.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. That is very
Well, that's the M, right? That's the M. So you get motivated. So what happens is you intercept, you're not getting a win. You're actually getting the opposite, right? It's that's an interesting model.
Yeah, I was shocked when I heard that, right? It's like, wow, and I know other companies have been trying to be able to do this, but this contractor was an example who does do that. I didn't get a whole lot into discussion with them. It was kind of at the end of the day, but it struck me what they were doing because I thought this is very unusual, and when you think about the whole change management and this DCMO model that, this decom model we just talked about, you buy technology for the guys to, to have a, more efficient, better quality, etc. But where we don't spend near enough time is on that motivation piece. We can train, as an equipment OEM, we provide training, to be able to do that. But ultimately, it still lands in, the mining house themselves to, you have the technology, you got to be able to embrace it and have the guys do it. And, certainly when we talked about embedding those new habits, right? And you talk about follow-up and coaching in the very beginning of this, boy, oh boy, it's a lot of work, to make sure that the guys, I got automation now, I got to be able to run automation, and it's
Well, struggle with-
think of,
People struggle
yeah.
with trusting the technology and trusting, especially
Yes.
like talk about bonus on the jumbo. And if you're used to being,
Yes,
I control my bonus, I control what's going to get out of here. I'm going to be hesitant to let that machine do its thing. Like it's got to prove itself to me before I'm ready to let it do that.
Yeah. What if the machine
Absolutely.
fails and I lose my bonus and it's not even my fault? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I know. So there certainly is, when you're mentioning it, Gus, in the beginning, those behaviors and kind of starting it and starting slow, right? It's about building up that trust. And in that beginning, look at the model and situational leadership. You're in the beginning now where I, have to work with that person, show them how to be able to do it, and then work with them very closely, that kind of real intensive piece to the point of, I can trust this. I can trust you're not going to screw me over on my bonus if something goes wrong. I can trust that the machine's going to do what is right. I can trust if it doesn't go right, we have countermeasures to be able to take, from that point of view. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work in that very beginning.
And it takes time for them to understand that it's real as well. So one of the things that we cover a lot here on our side is that, the real ROI that we're going to give you. Yes, there's a financial ROI. Yes, there's all these other things, but the most valuable commodity on this planet is your time.
Yes.
It's non-renewable. It's a one-way track. Once it's gone, you don't get it back. So when we say that your motivation to follow through what we're trying to implement is that we're trying to buy back your time.
Yes.
It's the most valuable thing. And at the beginning, it's not going to seem like it is, because it's going to take, to your point, it's going to take work to get used to it, implement it, depend on it, rely on it. Like Eric was just talking about, like being able to understand that it is reliable. But in the end, you will buy back an enormous amount of time. And just like we talked about the firefighting thing with the supervisor, now it's okay. Now, what do we have in line for you when we do buy back your time? Here's all the options and the opportunities that you do have to do that, because you've now bought back all of that time by adopting a system. So that's where it gets tricky, right? It's like, how you prove to me that I'm actually buying my time while still earning the same money, while still providing the same way for my family. It doesn't seem like it's realistic. It doesn't seem like it's a reality. It doesn't, I think you guys are pulling my chain because it does seem far-fetched, because you're thinking, when you're implementing something new, you're thinking usually as the project team 2, 3, 4 years out, what that end goal is going to look like. Not everyone's going to see what that roadmap's going to look like. They're focused on today and what is it doing to me today, right?
Correct.
And I'm sure you're seeing a lot of that stuff too, where you're like, no, trust me, long term, this is going to pay off. Yeah, but short term, I'm paying for this, right? And in an indirect or direct way, either with time or money or frustration, whatever the case may be, right?
The one cool thing Ken said about that at the beginning is he's actually, like, if he talked about the buckets and the counting the buckets, he didn't even mention the bigger goal of the, like, we're trying to get to 6,000 tons per day. It was like, I need you to get 30, by the end of the day, you need 100 buckets. That's your piece of this meeting 600,000, but focus on 100 buckets. And I'm not even going to tell you 100 buckets. Call in at 10, tell me where you're at, call in at noon, call in at 2, and then I'll see you at the end of the day. And then he started to build that like piece by piece for that single person, that individual on the day. They're not focused on the 6,000 tons. They're focused on how many buckets can I get, and I got to report back. And then he,
Correct.
follows that up. So he builds that behavior. He starts that conversation around, setting the expectation that, for us to meet that 600,000 tons, I need you to get to 100 buckets. So by 10, you
Correct.
should be at 30. And then he's like, okay, you didn't get to 30. What's going on? Tell me what's happening. And he's just building that up. And then he's catching the guy doing the 30 buckets. You got to 30. That's awesome. That's, you got to 60 today. You got to 100 or you got to 120. And then it just keeps building momentum. And I like it tied into your example, Gus, on like the 9 out of 10 on the test. Instead of, having the conversation around that one, if you said, great job, you got to, 90 buckets today. Awesome. You're probably person's going to be motivated to go to 91, 92. And there's other influencing factors, but those are, I love how I'm seeing it all come together as you guys are talking about it. And it's breaking it down into those little pieces for the individual. Yeah, it's going to be part of a bigger initiative. What can I do today? And what can I focus on? And we will get there.
That's right, because you're right, Eric. All you have is your part, and the rest belongs to everybody else, right? What can I work on, to deliver my part, with respect to that today, and that's, the one thing I've talked about, to people is if you just focus on what you're doing, the end will take care of itself. Just focus on what's in front of you today, because that's all you have. You have what's in today. That is all I can do. The work that I will be today. One of the things we've implemented when I go back to HUD Bay that has made this easier to be able to do or to visualize, right, is we built a standard for mucking. So everybody thinks at the beginning of the shift, I go down, I cage down, and I may go for a coffee first, and then I have to fuel and service, and then I have to drive to my refuge, and then or not my refuge, but my stove, and do my FLRA on my stove, and then I can start mucking, right? And if you lay out all that work and build a standard around it, with, like timelines around things, as an example, by this time, the expectation is you're going to be found your equipment by this time. You'll have driven to the stove by this time, maybe you fueled in the stove, whatever it is. But if you build that standard, right, and then when you have a coaching conversation with somebody around something, you're coaching them against a standard, right? This is an objective standard that we've built. Maybe the operator had a hand in building it himself, but this is how we do work, just like a lockout, tag out standard or whatever, right? But if you coach people to the standard, right, then it becomes a conversation about, not a personal conversation, right? It becomes about how are you meeting against the standard, right? It kind of diffuses or potentially helps diffuse, awkwardness, or the potential for conflict or something like that, we're coaching you to a standard, right? This is the expectations around things.
So then we're all on the same page on what that expectation is. And it makes it easier for you to catch someone doing something to the expectation. Because if I've got an expectation and I haven't told you, and you don't meet it, and every time I'm coming down and I'm complaining about it, you have no idea what I'm complaining about.
Correct.
Yeah. What are the sequence of events? So yeah, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation, Ken, and I really appreciate your time. And I mean, and in respect to the time that we promised for this show as well, we're gonna kind of start wrapping it up. But one of the things that I'm really, I'm really happy that we got to talk about today and learn about is that, rather than putting a deadline to your change, right, put in a time frame from which you want to start implementing behavior, right, and all the tools around it. And then how much time are you willing to commit to see the change through on a daily basis, right? So if you're only willing to give me 15 minutes a day to see this through, well, then your execution timeline will look X. If you want to put in a couple of hours per day to see this through, your execution timeline will look X. So rather than putting a schedule forward and saying by this day you're going to start and by this day you're going to end, we start looking at it at a more granular level from a behavior analysis standpoint, and from a total committed hours per day to really decide how long it's going to take to instill that behavior and that change. So that was a really eye-opening thing, and the whole concept around decom and how important the motivation part is. I mean, a lot of times with a lot of our clients, I mean, we have a really big positive recognition module in our system. And it usually comes down into like the fifth or sixth or seventh initiative, right? That they want to implement.
Yes.
And we talk
Yeah.
about all these tools that we have to pick up on the things that we want to improve. But we also have a very, very strong tool that talks about how to reinforce the things that are going right. And in reality, it should probably be the first thing you implement is a reward system. And then once that reward system is in place, then you can start implementing all kinds of other things, because you've got that behavior of that two-way conversation, like we talked about earlier, of giving and receiving acknowledgments for what's going on. And it sets
Yes.
the foundation for all other initiatives that you want to put forward. So that was a transformational concept in my head. Anyways, I don't know if how it landed for you, Eric.
Yeah, so it's funny you're saying that, because as you're talking about it, I'm thinking like one of the things that we, I'll say struggle with is getting people to meet what we call the minimum compliance. We set targets to preventative actions, and then it's hitting me square in the head. We always talk about that. You got to 90%, let's get that 10%. What's wrong with that 10%? And we have this great tool called the positive recognition that, and I've been like, how do I get people motivated? How do I get to that next piece? Well, it actually might just be to start recognizing people for when they're doing them and when they're beating them, and then start there, as opposed to just, and I did it just before this meeting. I took a screenshot and I sent it to my team, said, guys, like, the end of the month is coming, we're behind, what's going on?
Yeah.
Let's make sure we get this done. Where I could have just had the opposite, was I could have recognized people that were on track and that had actually, they had met the expectations, and then just talked about that, and encourage the other guys. You're 80% through the month, you're doing really good, and then just left it at that and see if that motivation part of it. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely go and try with the positive recognition. And to your point, it's about being committed to it and staying on it and doing it consistently. Because I fall into that trap, is you have great intentions, and then something else comes up and then you forget about it. And so maintaining that is really the lifeblood of making these things go.
The biggest thing, Eric, I forgot to mention too, not the biggest thing. There are criteria around motivation and catching people in the act and in terms of feedback. And I completely forgot about this, but things like what you just said, timely, feedback, when you see something or something being done, giving feedback timely, when it's fresh, the fresher, the better, that conversation is genuine and it's fact-based. It's not, and I know you guys know this, it's not like an attaboy type of thing, right? It's a conversation about, that is very specific about the jobs that they're doing, and the genuineness of that conversation, as opposed to, glossing over, right? And the essential impact of that feedback being timely. And there was a couple other things, and be darned if I can remember what they are right now. Those, when you said that triggered some of what I was thinking.
And we often highlight an interesting technology that we've come across in our last little bit. And you and I were talking a little bit at the start around what Mobile Eris was.
Yes.
It was certainly the first conversation I've had around it. And, if you could enlighten us a little bit about what it is, I love learning more about technology, so I'd love to hear more about it.
Sure. So Mobile Eris Mining Intelligence, which we're now within Epiroc, since we bought 100% of Mobile Eris. It used to be a company that Epiroc owned 33% of, but now we own 100%. It's a mining intelligence system. And basically it is premised around the ability of the main product is what we call situational awareness. And it's the ability to be able to see what's going on in the mine live, in terms of seeing where assets are located, if they're on the move, where people are with respect to, a 3D map. So you kind of get a really good visualization going around that. And as you gain information on that, we can click on an asset and you can look at what the data is around that asset. Are they on plan, off plan? What is some of the related telemetric data around that from that perspective? And then, we also have a function of planning and scheduling with short interval control. So when I think a lot of the change management things nowadays, one of the biggest things I look at is as a supervisor, when you look at that end of the shift scramble, when people are turning in manual cards and they're recording, information for that end of shift report, a lot of that information now can be fed into that report electronically. So it frees up the burden, on a supervisor from that end of shift report, because if I remember correctly, a lot of them, it's already stressing them at the beginning of their shift, to do that. So, and as you guys will know with Sovi, it just takes a lot of the burden off, from that point of view. However, now what does the supervisor do? What does his job start to look like now? Right. So there's a huge piece of change management in there now. What's their job going to look like now? So anyways, that's one other piece of mobile air's. And then the last piece that I consider and I can think of as a product, what we call onboard. And basically it's GPS for the underground. So if I have a wired mine, on Wi-Fi or LTE with this function called onboard sitting on a tablet in my vehicle, it's just like GPS. I can see vehicles coming at me in terms of the distance that they are. I can navigate to places that I don't know how to get to. I can dial in, or if I'm trying to find a piece of equipment, and it'll automatically, provide the navigation path to me. So that's kind of one of, I think, probably the biggest product that we have. I think that's the most catching out there right now is this onboard product, and we have it running at Hudbay Layla. But cool. You talk about something that can help the operator do their job better. That is definitely something that I talk about, that I think about, and then I look at something like planning and scheduling and electronic dispatch of tasks and reporting back on. Again, it's encouraging the operator or working with the operator to engage in those systems now, as opposed to the paper reporting system.
Yep.
So, and the motivation things that need to go around that, from that point of view, because people's behaviors and what they're going to do, to me, is going to radically change as we get more technology, right? Things become more automated. You need people to run an automation. I think you're going to see a far more emphasis on the quality of work, as opposed to just making tons, because we have those ability now to look at work differently. So to me, it just kind of changes a lot of what people will be doing.
But when you talked about it frees time up to, like, what does the supervisor do at the end of the day? That's sort of the discovery I'm having with safety work. Like, as we automate, not automate it, but we make reporting easier and we take away a lot of the admin work, you're left with, well, what am I meant to do? Well, the expectation is to focus on the quality of the activities you're doing. So at the end of the day, if it's not as busy trying to get a report in, we can have a better conversation with the employee coming up, make sure he's planned, ready for the next shift. What does he need? You're having just different conversations, and it's giving you that time and ability. And I think, to your point, like, are we talking about those things? Are we having those conversations? Are we setting those expectations?
Yeah.
Less logistics and more coaching and mentoring, right?
Cool.
Right.
That's the whole idea of technology.
Yeah. No, again, I mean, I'm sure we can talk about this for a long time. It's been very, very interesting to cover these topics. And again, I really appreciate your time coming on the show and talking about this. I'm sure a lot of our audience is really going to be taking away a lot of this learning as well, since everyone is essentially in a change management process of some kind. So I thank you again, Ken, and then Eric. Thanks again. Episode 12 in the books. And for everybody watching, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got lots of this great content coming your way, and we'll catch you next time.